Hi, my name's Wildflower. I'm an accredited certified EFT practitioner, and I specialize in working with women and their partners in finding peace after pregnancy loss. And I'm here with my mentor, Alina Frank, who is a master trainer of trainers of EFT, one of 3 matrix reimprinting trainers in North America, the best-selling author of How to Want Sex Again, and the producer of The Science of Tapping film. Welcome, Alina. And the purpose of this interview is to talk more about Alina's personal experience with pregnancy loss and how she discovered tapping.
Hi, Wildflower. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for taking this time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a story that not too many people know, and so it gives me an opportunity to revisit probably the most powerful time of my life. Actually, yeah, great.
Hi. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I was pregnant, and this is my first pregnancy, and I went full term, and I had a stillborn.
Oh,
And it was not only the loss and the grief around that traumatic event, but it was also, I think it was particularly difficult because of the expectations that I had. So I had spent 9 months meditating. Like, my meditation guru actually created a meditation series for each of the trimesters according to the development of the fetus.
oh
Um,
my gosh.
I had detoxed for a year before that. I was doing yoga for strengthening up all my core and having everything ready for the pregnancy, to carry and to deliver. And I felt very connected to the soul of this incarnating child when I had the huge cosmic 2x4 come down on me. Oh yeah, you're not going to have a baby. You're just going to, have a loss. And so I think it was compounded by that. And but yeah, it really threw me for many years.
Oh my
And uh, yeah, it was a very dark time for me. um and it wasn't all horrible. In fact, I was able to get pregnant afterwards and have 2 children and all of that, but the consequences of that loss were so big that it really lived in my body afterwards. And because I wasn't able to process the grief that I had, and I suffered a debilitating autoimmune condition that left me, sometimes with no energy whatsoever to even get out of bed. So
God.
it was a long road back, but I say that it was a powerful time because on the other end of it, once I did heal, then my whole life opened up, and that was all due to EFT.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow. I'm still struck by everything that you did to prepare for this birth. Like that's something I find in my work, that women often feel guilty, like they did something wrong or they didn't do enough, and it just happens. And you did you experience any of those feelings?
Yeah, in fact, even with all the things that I had done, I felt it. So I think it's
Yeah.
a universal feeling. Like, even if you've done everything right and you were so perfect, it can still happen. And in fact, the nurse practitioners that took care of me during that pregnancy and afterwards, they hired a statistician after it happened, and they said, you're actually, their practice was actually like long overdue for a stillborn at term to happen. So you can just say that it just played out statistically. It was meant to happen. I had another wonderful mentor, Pam England, who wrote Birth from Within, talk about her stillborn. And she said, it could be just the fickle finger of fate that happens.
Mm.
But yeah, even though I had prepared as much as I thought humanly possible, there were a couple of things that I look back on that had me feeling this feeling of guilt, that I could have done more. There was a moment right after my my baby shower where I felt like, wow, that's weird. There's a lot less movement in happening in there. And I didn't say anything. Life went on, and I was feeling the baby, but it was just like this, like some part of me knew that something was off, and I didn't say anything. And so that was part of the healing, was finding all those little pieces where I coulda, shoulda, woulda, and looking at that and letting go of some of the guilt that I had about that.
Yeah, wow. And another thought that comes to women and their partners is why me?
Right, exactly. Like, why me? Um, and people I mean, people just don't, your friends and your family and even your community, religious leaders, they don't know what to say to you when you've had an experience like this. And so they all contributed to my list of things that I had to resolve when I finally figured out that it was really the trauma was so multi-layered. Having people say, well-intentioned people say things like, well, it wasn't a viable being because it didn't take a breath. So in traditional Jewish circles, that means you don't have to sit Kaddish. You don't have to go through the process of lighting a candle for 7 days and having a real mourning. And so that's what I got from my religious community. And so then I had people saying, oh, get on with it. You can get pregnant right away after this. And, it leaves you like spinning, like, where am I going to get relief from the constant triggering that's happening in my environment from even, people that I love are they just don't know how to handle it. And it brings up all kinds of feelings of they can't help and helplessness, and they want to say something right, and it's always inappropriate. So yeah, there are lots of layers of that.
Yeah, it really is a misunderstood and unrecognized loss, and it tends to be a loss that's unspoken. So I think a lot of people don't say anything or don't know what to say, and because it's unrecognized and misunderstood, there's not a lot of support out
Right.
there.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't work with private clients anymore, but when I was, it was interesting how we're like, women are conditioned to minimize the loss if it was like not full term, right? If I read, you had your stillborn at 9 months. Boy, mine was just a few weeks old. It doesn't matter. It could be a completely devastating event for someone, even if it's like it can't live outside of the body. It's so tiny. It still has a tremendous amount of pain associated. And in that case, I think people are more dismissive. If like you didn't even tell anyone and you tell them I had a miscarriage, then they'll just like, oh, go try again. And those are really painful comments that again, well-intentioned people, but they still hurt.
Absolutely, absolutely. Another thing that I find is that hurt just feels like it will go on forever. Like it's really, there's no way around it, through it, over it. What was your experience with that?
Yeah, what's interesting about my experience is that I just did the opposite. So I hear what you're saying, and that happens, but also the opposite happens where it's like, no, I'm moving on with my life. This is it. Let's plan the next one. Let's go, barge forward. I don't look back. I don't need to wallow in the pain. I'm a soldier on. So that is what got me in a lot of trouble, is just denying that was really what was going on, that I had so much pain that I couldn't handle it. So the way that I handled it was trying not to feel it. And what happened then was having it show up in my body. So sometimes it's like your body says, hey, you better pay attention to this, in a
Mhm.
whisper. And then it gets a little louder and says, hey, you know, pay attention here. You're not doing well. Your health is declining. And then it just screams at you. So till you can't do anything but look at it. And that's the fascinating thing about the body. It'll let you know when things are off. And I was definitely off. And finally, and I kind of, I sort of intuitively knew that it was connected to the trauma. But when I discovered EFT, that was saying, look at it from the perspective of what are the emotional contributing factors of your physical symptoms, and when did it start, and what was happening maybe 6 months to a year. Well, I was diagnosed 6 months after I had the loss. So
Wow.
then I got it. I really got it on a deeper level that, yeah, it was absolutely related to that trauma, and I needed to really release that trauma. Yeah.
Yeah. But it took you a while to realize that.
Oh, yeah.
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 You got diagnosed 6 months after, but it was
so
after that.
So it was 12 years of trying everything that I could. I was a patient at a traditional Chinese medicine college for a year and a half, going weekly for treatments. I went to a homeopath. I went to a naturopath. I took more kinds of vitamins, supplements, everything from a functional medicine perspective. I changed my diet from vegan to vegetarian to macrobiotic to nourishing traditions, like making, bone broth and all these things, and eating and drinking raw milk. Ayurvedic, I tried that diet for a long time. So I did everything that I could. And I mean, that's all the holistic alternative stuff I tried. On an allopathic road that I took, it was hiring and firing 3 endocrinologists who kept telling me, you're not going to get better. You just have to adapt to taking a pill the rest of your life. One guy that I had to tap on a lot, what he said, it was because, well, it doesn't even have a charge anymore. I can barely remember what he said, but it was something around the lines of, you did this to yourself, or you're at fault because you didn't go to an OBGYN. You chose to go through a midwife.
Oh dear.
A doctor would have picked that up. No, I don't think so. But
Right.
so anyway, so yeah, I tried everything. I spent thousands of dollars and countless hours trying to find something to help me feel better. And these things that I tried would work for a little while, but then fizzle out and not really kick in the way I really wanted to feel, like my hair wasn't falling out, and I was, not in bed sleeping, and all of this fatigue and weird weight gain and things, every part of my body was just like a whack. So, when I found this little thing called EFT online, because back in the day, that was the only way to find it, was Gary Craig's website, the founder. I went, and when I read it, I'm like, well, it sounds intriguing, and sure, I can target that period of time and all the things that happened. But, how is this tapping thing going to help me when I've tried all these other things and none of it really helps? So I laugh when people say, well, you got to be a believer to have EFT. It's a placebo thing. Like, no. Most people that come to see us, as you know, they're like, well, I'll try it because somebody told me I should try it. But most people come in very skeptical that it's going to help them, especially with something that they feel so deeply about, like the grief around the loss of a child. They're like you said, feeling like it's never going to go away. So I didn't give it much merit, and I just started tapping night and day, and I felt so good that I actually made myself sick because I was on too much medication. So I went to my doctor, and she said, what are you doing? And I said, this weird tapping thing. She said, whatever it is, just keep doing it. And so I did, and boy, that was like 16 years ago, and started feeling better right away. And then I can't name an area of my life that it hasn't helped.
Wow. Wow. So when you started tapping, did you make the connection to the pregnancy loss?
Yes. So Gary very clearly said you've got to find the significant emotional events in your life that were around that period where you started getting your symptoms. And at that point, I knew. And I said, well, okay, there might be some pain there. Might be some grief there. There might be some loss there. But it was layer after layer of things. And I wish I had had a practitioner early on to guide me through the process, because it felt very overwhelming to me once I started going into that deep well of pain and sadness and loss, and these pictures that I had long buried, like of my milk coming in, of being in the maternity ward. Like you're surrounded by women having babies, those sorts of things. Yeah, they just started popping in, and I was feeling overwhelmed too. And even though I was feeling overwhelmed, I was still able to kind of navigate that. But there were parts of it that needed to be explored with a practitioner years later. And that's why I encourage people with something like that big and such a big hairball with so many components, please seek the guidance of a skilled practitioner that can, hold your hand through the process and knows the right questions to ask you and knows how to do the process in a very gentle and safe way.
Yeah, yeah, it's so layered, so layered. Yeah, yeah. Now, other feelings, or I guess effects that I've seen after pregnancy loss is parents can become, well, they can have difficulty getting pregnant again. They can have difficulty with sex and intimacy issues, and they can become overprotective of children that they already had or that they have subsequently.
Oh, yeah.
Can you speak to any of those?
Yes. So I with my daughter, after I lost Hannah, I got pregnant 2 years later with Sophie, and I thought that something was seriously wrong with my breastfeeding, and I hired a lactation consultant, and I went in and she observed me for a while, and she said, "Were you adopted?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Because you have the same pattern that I had and what got me into this business in the first place. And that is overcompensating, thinking your baby is hungry when they're not." And I said, "Oh, well, that might be related to the fact that I had a stillborn before her." And bingo, that was it. So it was that I was overfeeding her. And I was, it caused all kinds of problems. I was overfeeding. So yeah, it is this idea that something's going to go wrong. Going through and trying not to think about the ultrasound, because you have to look back at all the triggers that are there that are conscious and unconscious. And so I found out that my baby had died by getting an ultrasound.
Oh,
So anytime I went to get an ultrasound, which then I was considered, with the subsequent pregnancies, I was considered high risk. So I had to have them more frequently. And so every time going in there, like bracing myself and feeling like, oh, so yeah, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of worry. There's a lot of stress on the couple. And when you have someone that's helping you, they can bring in all of those questions about, well, how's it going in your relationship? Are you feeling more connected? So I've seen couples come together as a result of like really bonding through a crisis like this, or they fall apart. And the statistics were, last time I checked, there was something like 70% of relationships that have a pregnancy loss don't make it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's so well, so layered as you covered, but and far reaching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So without putting a kind of time label on it, what was your process like as far as getting through it? You mentioned that you felt results right away. But there are many layers to it. So what was your process like working through all those layers?
Right. I feel very fortunate, and you know this because you were mentored and certified with me as your trainer. I feel very passionate about the idea that that there's a lot of tapping out there that's not clinical evidence based. It's a version of EFT light, LITE, where we're just kind of tapping on, here's the formula is 1 round negative, 1 round neutral, 1 round positive, and we're done. And there's there is no one out there is no YouTube video showing tapping on my autoimmune condition because I had a stillborn. Like that's an individual thing that happens. And so the blessing and the curse of the proliferation of tapping out there is that it's gotten a lot of people interested, but people try it and they're like, oh, didn't work for me. I think I was lucky that I found it really early on when the only source on the internet was from the founder. And he really drilled home, and I got trained and certified by Gary. He really drilled into us the importance of finding specific events. And so when I looked at that and said, wait a minute, there are all these events. There are all these events that were connected to it that bring up a feeling of loss and sadness. Let me just start with those. And I probably tapped on around 20 just for the stillborn. And I mentioned some of them, like walking out and having, being wheeled out of the hospital without a baby in my arms, feeling the milk coming in, being in the maternity ward. So it probably took me a good 3 weeks of tapping regularly. And I was like, something's going on. I'm not feeling the same way I was. And so right away, I mean, within 3 weeks, I started feeling better, actually, right away. Like I would say a significant amount of people feel something shifting with the very first time that they tap, especially when done well, like it guided by a practitioner or really focusing in on those events. And I started like, whoa, okay, this is interesting. I feel better. I don't emotionally, I feel better. And that's what I was going on. And then suddenly my body started feeling better. And so that took about 3 weeks. And that 3-week process, right at the end of that 3-week process, was when I went to see my doctor and said, like, what's going on here? And she just said, well, I think you're on too much medication. Let's start, dropping it back. So I would say it took probably like a month and a half. I was on the phone with Gary Craig saying, is this even possible? Like, how does this work? I need to know more. And so, so yeah, that was the most of my process. And then within a year of helping my friends and my family and seeing the results I was getting with them, it's when I started teaching and training others.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for that. Yeah, yeah. So did you get, there's one thing in EFT called the generalization effect. When you tap on enough events and issues, like, did you find you needed to tap on every single thing that came up around that pregnancy loss? Or was there a point where you covered enough and some cleared without even tapping on them?
I don't know that was the case for stillborn, but I certainly have had that happen many times since then. I'm thinking about an accident that my son had, and going and just seeing him at the hospital and all the things that happened. Where I know at the time I was like, oh, this is horrific, like seeing blood on his face and all of that. But when a practitioner took me through the actual event, there was just maybe one thing that needed to be cleared, and all the rest of it collapsed. And that was a real experience I had of feeling like, wow, this is incredible. It just took everything else away. And I've certainly seen that in with clients quite often, where you really don't. I mean, I was part of the Veteran Stress Project, so we worked with a lot of vets, and we were going through event after event, and I knew that moment where they'd look at me like, I have to tap on all the things that happened in Vietnam. No, you don't need to. The proof is in how you're feeling. The proof is, do you have those nightmares anymore or not? The proof is, how's the pain level? So you're gauging by that, as well as how much you have to clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Hannah is the name of the baby that you lost.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you've really come around. And when you think of Hannah now, what comes up for you?
Yeah, I just looked over because we had this room painted, and we just put all the furniture back. But I have a little altar. It's not set up yet, and it has her picture. And I really feel her presence with me. I feel it when I'm doing healing sessions, when I'm needing some guidance, when I am out there, talking about this very thing. She's very present for me, very, very present for me. And now it's like a gift, and I truly feel this way on every level, that experience was a real gift, because it led me eventually to finding this tool that now I teach others to do. And I would have never had that had she not, passed. And so I'm very thankful and really connected, and feel her presence with me. And it's lovely. Yeah. It's just so her middle name was Grace. So it's like a lot of like, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Hannah Grace. Wow. Sounds like she has been a big part of your life and continues to be a big part of your life. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that can be, so on the other side, we have this thing called a cognitive belief shift. When you have done the work and thoroughly processed an event with EFT, either on yourself or with the aid of a practitioner, what you have is you view the event in a completely different way. And the wisdom and the learning that came from those powerful negative experiences suddenly is just like a gift to you. It's a blossoming, it's a transformation, it's a point of you looking back and saying, well, had that not happened, this wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have been led down this path. I would have remained down that road where things weren't going that well anyway. So there are all these gifts that happen with a big trauma like that, and but we can't see it or appreciate it until we're on the other side and can clearly look at it like, oh, that's why that happened. There was a reason for all of that to happen.
Yeah. It sounds like you can really acknowledge and celebrate her now.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really feeling her present myself right now. Thank you so much for sharing this story, Alina. It's just been lovely. Yeah.
Thanks
yeah.
for asking.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think that you're a great practitioner, and I would encourage people to seek your services if they have this particular problem, and all of the tangential issues that come from that, including problems with sex and intimacy, which is huge out there.
Yeah. Okay. Super. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Wildflower.
You're welcome.